So I'm going to be honest, I wrote the hook for this episode, Gen Z's $44 billion buying power, a while ago. And my assistant, Jamie, was looking over everything today and came to me and basically told me, hey, Josh, you're completely wrong.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
The actual figure is in 2024, Gen Z is estimated to have $2.7 trillion in buying power right now. And Gen Z is on track to be the wealthiest generation of all time. Bank of America projects that Gen Z's global spending is going to reach $12.6 trillion by 2030. In the trailer that released last week, we talked about Gen Z's $44 billion buying power. But today, we're talking about Gen Z having $2.7 trillion in buying power. So if we aren't talking to Gen Z, you are missing out on so much money. So today, instead of our episode being called The Billions of Reasons to Care About Gen Z, we're talking about the trillions of reasons to care about Gen Z. And so we're going to talk about why knowing Gen Z and marketing to Gen Z is either going to make or break your 2025 to 2030 roadmap, because you're going to be missing out on that $1 trillion of buying power. Obviously, trillions of dollars isn't going to you, but they're controlling trillions and trillions of dollars of buying interest. We had two big requests from last season. We wanted an episode that was a little bit longer, dove in a little bit deeper, and you guys requested that I answer a few specific questions on each topic. So each week, I'm going to ask you to send in questions for next week's episode. And the first thing I want to do each episode is talk about a case study. So today I want to take a look at Duolingo. So we've seen a lot of memes. You've probably heard them talked about. Duolingo has become very popular in Gen Z and Gen Z culture in general. They're a language learning app, and they've built this distinctive messaging style and culture, very meme-based culture, similar to like the Wendy's style, where you see them being very irreverent in the style that they speak, right? They went and they met Gen Z where they were at when they were young, right? Short form social content, very creator focused, very short form focused, very meme forward, right? And so all of that to say, they've been doing this for a while, and so we have results that we can actually see. So in quarter two of 2025, Duolingo reported 41% increase in revenue to $252.3 million, right? They've been working at this for a while, and they've seen increases. We've talked about percentage increases on brands like this, but we're seeing massive increases on a stupid little language app, right? If you looked 10 years ago, you were going to talk about Rosetta Stone if you talked about a language learning application, right? Duolingo wouldn't have even been in the conversation. They would have been a little app that taught to kids. But they leaned in to Gen Z. They knew what to do. They focused on where Gen Z was at, and they built a massive brand, a massive business that has the money to reach Gen Z where they're at, and has the money to do even things like a Super Bowl commercial. Imagine a little app having the money for a Super Bowl commercial. That's what they were able to do because they really leaned in to Gen Z. They knew that there was a buying power there. They knew that there was potential there. So what can we learn from Duolingo? Obviously, they have billions of dollars, right? They have millions to spend on ad revenues. They spent millions on one single TV ad, right? And you don't have that. So we're going to take a look at 3 things that you can learn from them and that we can learn in general about the buying power of Gen Z. So the first is to design for social search, not just SEO. So we've talked about SEO before, and SEO is going to be different now that Instagram has opened up Instagram as an opportunity for SEO. But knowing that social platforms are search platforms is going to change and shift the way that you set up your content, right? The number one search platform of all time is Google, right? The number 2 is YouTube. And these social platforms, TikTok, Instagram, are quickly rising, especially in these younger generations, right? People are going and searching for things right on the social platforms. So turn your FAQs into 30, 45-second videos. I mean, we're going to be doing that with this show here. The questions you send us to ask, they're going to be clips that people can go ahead and watch. Add on-screen keywords and captions, and hashtags are not the only way you can search now. AI opens up the opportunity for AI searches, right? AI does searches through your content and allows Gen Z to actually find stuff that is in your content, in the transcript of what you're talking about, as well as in your caption, right? So designed for social search, not just SEO search. So yes, I still think you should be doing blogs for your SEO search. But for your Gen Z audience, you should also be using social platforms as a search platform. So tip number 2 is prove your values with receipts. So Gen Z is often written off, and they know they're often written off, but they're smart, and they're not as young as you think they are. They're going to research, they're going to screenshot, and they're the most likely generation to boycott something, okay? So make sure you don't have vague claims. Make sure you don't claim something that you're not going to stand up for. So if you say something, stand up for it. If you get caught in something, whether it's a lie or a stance you took, lean into it. Don't go away from it. Lean into it. That's what Duolingo did. They got caught in this weird thing where a Duolingo notification came off as creepy. So they leaned into it. They made it a meme, right? They made it a big thing. That was a big jumping off point for Duolingo, and it enabled them to become the meme-ready brand that we all know. Okay, so tip number 3 is price value ladders for the dupes and thrift era. Okay, I had to have someone younger than me explain this to me. Essentially, it's a freebie or a lower price option buy-in for these younger generations. So essentially what we're seeing is, especially the younger you get, the less adherence to firm or name brand companies, right? So people are looking for an opportunity to really get in at whatever level they can. So people love thrift stores, people love fakes or dupes, or a way in on the ground floor of your brand, right? They want to be a part of your brand, right? So the ultimate goal is to sell Gen Z, Gen Alpha on your brand, right? We want them bought into the vision, and then we want to get them on the ground floor. And that's where we jump into the value ladder piece. So ignoring the Gen Z speak of the dupes and thrift era, right? We're looking ultimately at a value ladder. And there should always be something on the base stair. We always want, whoever's bought into our story, we always want them here, right? On this bottom level. And then we can work them up with the different levels. So especially our younger audiences or our audiences who have lower income or are newer to our brand, we want them bought in always on this bottom rung, and then we start to work them up, right? So we don't want to have blanket discounts, and we don't want to be constantly offering blanket discounts. We're not Mattress Warehouse, right? So what we want to do is have a entry point for our audience. And this is something we see with a lot of Gen Z brands, is a free offering or a low-cost offering that keeps them subscribed, and then we can add things up as they move on. And this is something we've seen over time, right? As an audience is younger, they start at a lower level, and as they get older, we move them up and up and up and up. And it's what we saw with Duolingo, right? They bought in at this free level, and then they went higher and higher and higher, and they made a lot of money doing that. 3 things I want you to keep in mind is design for social search, not just SEO search, provide values with receipts, and price value ladder. And we're going to jump into some questions in just a minute. All right, so you guys sent in some questions. Again, here's the email if you want to send some in for next week about Gen Alpha. First question, do Gen Z actually have money to spend? Yes, we already talked about that. There's also 2 points for Gen Z. So I'm Gen Z. I have a household, and I have a lot of influence on the money that is spent, right? There's also younger Gen Z, which have less control over money, but they still have control over household income. So the youngest Gen Z is 16 years old, right? They have a lot less control over their income than a 26-year-old has, but they still control household income. So the way they control income is going to be different. We may need to market more towards an overall household income for that 16-year-old, but they still do control household income, and they have money to spend. Where should I show up first to reach Gen Z? So in general, rule of thumb, mobile first. TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, but a lot of the millennial ways are not out of the question. We're talking email, SMS. Those are still really solid. Always diversify your leads. That's always a good rule of thumb. But mobile first. They're on their phone. That's where they're getting their leads. That's true for our millennials, our Gen Zs, our Gen Alphas. Yes, they often have computers. It depends on your demographic. But again, it's always going to be mobile first. What type of content works best? Fast, honest. Again, you have to remember they've been inundated by content a lot of their life. I spend most of my days working on content marketing. So short form, it really works well, but honesty is really the thing. Something that feels authentic to you and their brand, something they feel, whether it's true or not, something they feel is authentic, something they feel is not trying to force something down their throat is really, really important. How do we build trust quickly? Same thing I just said. Be transparent, be honest, show behind the scenes, really straightforward policies, as transparent as you can be. Again, it depends on your brand. When I consult with brands that are more established, there's sometimes a less opportunity to be straightforward, right? I mean, if you have an established brand, you can't share every policy you've ever had. If you're a small startup, you can. It also depends on your demographic. What turns Gen Z off immediately? Ooh, this is a great question. Over-polished, addy stuff. Right? I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about before. They've been advertised to a lot. So things that feel like they're not meant for them is another great one. So things that are not honest and authentic, and things that feel like they're just being shoved in as a part of it. Like you're trying to advertise to their mom and dad and them. So when you're marketing to those 16-year-olds, you've got to think, yeah, I have to market to their parents, but also to them. So we're thinking about how do we do both at the same time. And we're going to talk about some of that next week when we talk about Gen Alpha because they're 15 or less, right? So you're talking about household income or household marketing for sure. So we're looking at a lot of pieces there. So yes, stuff that's meant for them and stuff that's honest to you and your brand. And also, I would say being inconsistent. So we talk about greenwashing, like if you say you're eco-friendly, but then you aren't in your actual practices, that's going to be an issue. If you've attracted an audience that cares about something and then finds out that you don't care about that, that's going to be a problem. And our last question is, do we need influencers to win Gen Z, or can we get away without it? Yes and no. I would say, and I say this every week, I think, be wherever your audience is at. So influencers and micro-influencers are a great way to go where Gen Z is at, right? They follow an influencer, many influencers. So it's a great opportunity to find your audience where they're at and build a trust between your brand and them automatically. That being said, you don't need influencers. You don't need to listen to anything I say, but you will be more successful when you partner with influencers. But again, you have to think about your brand and your audience. If you're adding Gen Z on top of other things and you pick the wrong influencer, you may alienate your other brand. So be thinking about that. I talk about this in my consulting all the time. You have to really think about, like, how do you not alienate your current audience while keeping Gen Z? If you're just doing Gen Z, there is no reason you should not be doing influencers. I cannot think of a reason why you would not do influencers in some way, shape, or form. Again, here's the email to send us your questions. Next week, we're talking about Gen Alpha. That's just anyone born between 2010 and 2024. This is the first year that the whole generation is born, and so we can kind of talk about them more in depth. And I'm excited to talk about a whole new generation that we're going to have to start to think about. A few things to remember with Gen Z. One, they've got massive buying power that I didn't even realize. They're on track to be the wealthiest generation right now. They have over $2 trillion in buying power. If you are not talking to them, you are already being ignored. Until next time, this has been New Gen Marketing.